Good day, I'm Junior Researcher Adam Southgate, and in today's lecture we'll be covering the Eldritch Sphere's Breichiau Hir. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also, if you enjoy the lecture and find it informative, please like the video and click the bell to ensure you do not miss any future announcements. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views and stories of your own interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. Also, I'm always ready to answer any questions you may have, and please share these lectures with any hunters you feel would benefit from them. So to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, thanks to the work of Hunter and ProBurb Official and a team of journeyman hunters they were leading, the Bach that had taken up residence within a disused recycler tunnel network was eliminated. The creature had nested within the site in order to give birth to a new generation. This became a high priority contract as due to the vast network they were in, the young would have been near impossible to find and could have reappeared almost anywhere. The problem ProBurb Official and their team faced was that due to the entity having engorged itself upon the local wildlife and some rather unfortunate hikers, it would not be enticed with the typical explosive meal strategy. As the Bach needed to be taken down before it gave birth to its young, the team could not wait for it to become hungry again, so they decided on an altogether more risky strategy. Instead of entering the unstable tunnels, the team set up large speakers at the entrance to the network and blasted a series of low-frequency pulses below the Earth. This had the desired effect of overwhelming the entity's auditory organs, its primary means of observing the world, sending it into a desperate frenzy. In its thrashing, the creature collapsed the tunnels upon itself, burying it alive and crushing the young within it. After this, the team descended to investigate where they found the bloody remains of the creature under tons of earth. This led to a week-long excavation project where the entity's remains were slowly and carefully retrieved from beneath the rubble. A research team assigned to the project, after painstakingly combing through the corpse, found that the entity had not yet given birth to its young, with 17 found ready to be birthed within the corpse. Hunter and ProBurb Official and their team should be commended for their quick and inventive thinking. Secondly, a man was discovered horrifically mutilated and insensible, wandering aimlessly across the Brecon beacons. His left arm was completely missing, with steel piping and rubber hoses rammed into the open wound. His back had had rusted iron plates burned and fused into the skin, while his right leg had had a steel rod forced through the bones from the foot to the hip joint. His face was the worst of all, with a steel mask heated to the point of glowing and then forced onto it, rendering him blind. After he was found, we attempted to save him, however the extensive trauma he had gone through had made it impossible. We did thankfully manage to question the man before he had passed, finding out that he was a simple civilian who had been kidnapped, mutilated and discarded. He recounted how he was told by his captors that he was going to serve a greater purpose over and over again. However, as they continued to ruin his body, they sounded less and less sure, ultimately concluding that he was a failure, ending with his release. He also managed to describe for us a sigil he saw multiple times before his captors took his eyes, and from his description, it was very similar to that of the Iron Cult. The poor man told of hearing, after the plate was affixed to his skull, the sounds of others moaning and screaming in pain. However, he was never close enough to them to know how many there actually were. If accurate, this represents a dark turn for the already unhinged Iron Cult, and one that must be investigated. We currently know of 3 separate locations where Iron Cult members are situated, and as such, we would like a group of hunters to apprehend one of these members for questioning. This must be conducted quietly and with no witnesses, as we do not wish to make the cult move up whatever they are attempting to do. Those interested can apply for the bounty at their local order office, or they can contact me directly through the comment section of this video. Entities of the Eldritch sphere are incredibly difficult to pin down. This is due to their fundamental nature as beings far above ourselves, with their existence being infinitely layered. Each Eldritch being's mind is akin to an entire universe of varying sizes, and these entities exist within the minds of those Eldritch entities above them. If you were one such being, within your mind would exist an entire universe with its own physical laws, life, and worlds. Now, if you were to look into the head of one of the beings within the universe of your mind, you would also find another universe. Well, at the same time, your universe exists within the mind of another being. This layering is infinite, but at the same time and paradoxically has a beginning and an end. This is because within each universal mind there are untold numbers of living beings with their own universal minds, and so on and so on. But there is a start with the greater Eldritch gods, which we know very little about, thankfully, and an end with the lesser Eldritch beings, such as the Dylan Weir. Today's entity, the Breichiau Hir, is possibly below even the Dylan Weir, as unlike the Dylan Weir, they are not authentic Eldritch entities and are instead the byproduct of a true Eldritch being. Despite this, the damage and pain they inflict upon their victims is just as palpable. Now, I'm going to show you a quick video before we begin proper. The video you just viewed was recorded by what we now refer to as Breichiau Hir B86. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to recount to you an extrapolation of what B86 went through leading up to and after the recording. Before this event took place, B86 was a typical human man, aged 57. He lived with his wife of 22 years and was a father of 2, each of which had since left home. On the night in question, the wife of B86 had been visiting their daughter's home for the weekend, leaving him alone. While he laid in bed, he heard the sounds of what we can assume he thought was an intruder. We can see from his call logs that he attempted to contact emergency services, however, the call did not go through. Panicking, he began recording as he heard the creature begin walking up the stairs. After this encounter concluded, he became another instance of Breichiau Hir, number 86, tracked by the Order. We do not know how the Breichiau Hir came into being, most likely in a similar way to the followers of the Frozen Sun. They are an accidental byproduct of a true Eldritch entity. However, since their creation, they have become a plague upon our sphere and a species in their own right, with distinct behaviors and even a method of reproduction. Like with true Eldritch beings, Breichiau Hir have the ability to impart a type of madness upon those who view them. In their case, this madness is demonstrated as the person believing themselves unable to move, their bodies going limp. This is not a true paralysis, and is instead psychosomatic. In fact, with timely intervention and a good deal of effort, these early-stage victims can eventually recover through a range of therapies. Most victims, however, are not lucky enough to be saved in time, as this false paralysis is only the first stage. Once the victim believes themselves to be immobile, Breichiau Hir will approach, reaching out with both hands to grab a limb of the victim. The entity will tighten its grip on the limb and begin slowly pulling in one direction with one hand while keeping its grip with the other. As it does this, its secondary effect comes into play. The body of the victim will become as soft as clay in the entity's hands, flesh, muscle, and bone yielding and deforming under its touch. As the entity slowly pulls, the limb will extend, becoming warped and unnaturally long. Sadly for the victim, this feels more as if the limb is being slowly torn away. Those saved in time described the feeling of skin ripping, muscle tearing, and bone cracking, but being unable to even scream. The entity will continue this stretching of the human form until the victim is left a warped parody of a man, limbs abnormally long but non-uniform in length. The torso will be left narrowed and slightly twisted in shape, being at least half again as long as it was. The head too will have been stretched in almost random ways, with the nose flattened against the face, the lower jaw pulled outward and to the side, and the eyes being sealed behind skin. Even after all this, however, the victim still remains human, terribly deformed, but still human. The final stage will rob them of that humanity. The Breichiau Hir will lock their mouth over the victims, their glass-like teeth puncturing the skin around the victim's lips. They will then begin to regurgitate an unknown substance into the victim's mouth that will fill their stomach and lungs. As they do this, the victim's skin will shift to a purpley black, and what was human will have been lost. Where the entity latches on to their victim's mouth will always bear the scarring of their teeth. This is actually how we identify different instances of these entities, as their teeth change rather often and no two are the same, so these scars act almost as fingerprints. So, this is how a Breichiau Hir is born, created from the mutilation of a human. To make things worse, while the entities themselves appear devoid of human thought, through testing by linking an MMB to a captured Breichiau Hir, we found that the person's mind is still deep within, terribly fractured and screaming. Originally, the Breichiau Hir was placed within the subsphere category. This was because they have the ability to shift in and out of a specific subsphere at will. This confusion was rectified after a great deal of testing upon captured Breichiau Hir, who react in exactly the same way to beings from the Abrahamic sphere as other Eldritch entities, which would be impossible if they originated from any other sphere. The subsphere they are able to slip within appears to be one that they have co-opted, giving them abilities that are similar, though distinct, from Umbra D. Simply put, Breichiau Hir can enter their subsphere through any shadow of sufficient darkness, and reappear from any other shadow across the earth. Through tagging these entities, we learned that it is not as simple as it sounds. We originally believed that it was a case of a smaller universe, where 5 minutes travel there would equate to 5 hours here. However, instead we learned that these entities can drop into one shadow in a location and reappear almost instantly from another shadow hundreds of miles away, but at the same time they can also spend days or even years within this subsphere, implying some kind of livable environment. What they do within this reality is anyone's guess. However, from the moment they are made, they are fully capable of entering it. Even when not within their subsphere, they are capable of frightening bursts of speed, being clocked moving from a dead stop to 56 miles per hour, and then instantly stopping once again. This sudden acceleration and deceleration should kill them outright, however, it does not. As combatants, they are tricky. They still follow most of the same biological laws as ourselves, where too much physical damage will kill them. However, unlike us, and as stated, they are capable of disappearing into shadow. This gives them the ability, within a sufficiently darkened room, to appear from behind, strike, and then retreat. At the same time, their ability to warp the human body also comes into play. If they are actively battling a human, they will attempt to grip the person and pull, warping the attacker's body to the point where movement becomes impossible. This led to the hunter's joke of wanting a Breichiau Hir to grab a specific part of their body. However, in reality, this will leave the human in a terrible and irreversible state, with spires of stretched flesh jutting out in a myriad of directions. The Breichiau Hir will not attempt to turn these individuals, simply leaving them to their fate, which is grim without the intervention of others, as they will be too deformed to even take the most immediate escape. However, there has been recorded instances of the Breichiau Hir taking these would-be attackers with them into the shadows, never to be seen again. So, how does one take on a Breichiau Hir? This is not an easy entity to take on. Their speed, ability to warp your body, and their movement through their subsphere makes them a nightmare to hunt. However, there are some steps that can be taken to increase your chances. The first and most important is the MMB. Having one equipped and linked to you will protect you from the false paralysis effect. Without one, there wouldn't even be a fight, simply another instance of Breichiau Hir created. The second is to have control over where you're facing it. A location with lights that you can activate and without furniture is best, as this will eliminate most if not all shadows. Also, make sure you have more than one light source, otherwise they may attack you from your own shadow. The third, weapons such as shotguns, spears and polearms should be used exclusively. The latter two will allow you to keep a physical barrier between you and the entity, not allowing it to close the gap as you stab at it. The former, while it does not physically place a barrier between you and the entity, if you can fire fast enough, the spread will guarantee a great many hits. The truth is that you will not be able to outmaneuver a Breichiau Hir, and so your goal will be to control the engagement as much as humanly possible, opening up windows in which to strike while at the same time making sure they have no possible path of retreat. There is one other method for taking down a Breichiau Hir, however it requires more specialized skills. Specifically, you will require someone to act as bait, while you lay in wait at a distance. Once the entity is in a good position, you will need to make the shot with a scoped rifle, without hitting the poor fool who acted as your patsy. This is incredibly difficult and can take years of practice to master, and should not be attempted by those who have not gained enough experience with marksmanship. The Eldritch sphere makes me uncomfortable. Its focus on both the warping of mind and body is highly distasteful. But going beyond that, the way it robs you of your humanity to the point where you will begin fighting for it is truly horrifying. Even in the case of the Breichiau Hir, where the human mind is still in there screaming, the body still acts against mankind, and for no discernible higher reason. The truth is that there most likely is no reason, as those of the Eldritch sphere mostly fail to even notice us, as we are so far below them. We are literally ants fighting gods, but it's a fight worth struggling through, even if in the end we lose. But that will be all for today. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom, thank you.